DCX Sonic Issue 4. It starts with a flashback to when Sonic and his friends were first put in a force field while the traditional superheroes were holding Darkseid, as if they were supposed to accomplish anything when neither one of them thought to hold his arm that was holding the emerald. Because that had been smart. Both of them have super strength, and yet it's not being used against him, so Darkseid's overpowered enough to have immunity to super strength too. It just seems like favoritism on the part of his original creator. Flash gets an emerald and gets put in a force field with the rest of his friends, and Cyborg says he could use the power of an emerald to make a wormhole for them to escape. He blasts a laser and they go through the way out, unhesitantly giving up on fighting someone who really needs to be stopped and is heavily outnumbered. Then they start boringly talking for a while, doing nothing. It talks up Darkseid some more as the most OP threat ever conceived, because that's totally a believable villain alright. This kind of character is why I don't engage in superhero fiction. It's not relatable that's all about exclusively refighting the same ridiculous cartoon villains until it gets old. And he's not even a literal wizard. Darkseid's engine is destabilizing the entire planet supposedly, but it's hard to believe because they aren't seeing any effects of that. And you'd think there'd immediately be earthquakes if there was. And it's just a ripoff of Sigma and his universe engine. And I know the world's not going to be destroyed, so who cares? Since the Ragnarok's taking the full brunt of the effect of the engine for now, for some weird reason, it's buying them time. Why? And why doesn't he immediately leave and go after them? Is there a constant unbreakable barrier around it? Well, I guess so, and they close up the wormhole so we can't follow them. That's the one thing the OP creator's pet can't do. Make a wormhole. Cyborg says that because the fabric of space-time is in constant flux, he can't get them a clear path back to their world. Even though he was just told that only the Ragnarok is being affected by the space-time affecting emeralds. All that dialogue just to tell us what we already assumed. That they're gonna look for the rest of the emeralds. Logically, Superman and Flash would find the rest of them instantly from how fast they are. Thankfully, the story goes on to be about Blaze instead, so maybe it will be like that. At first, it's nice to see her in a level from Sonic Rush, but is this going to be used well or just be eye candy to brainwash you? Blaze has to dodge the attacks of another unimmersive cartoon villain I don't know about. Blaze is not in the Soul Dimension, even though it's not IDW Sonic. Why wasn't it explained why Blaze is in somewhere other than the Soul Dimension when it's not Sonic's birthday? I don't know why they would ever work for Darkseid. I just have to assume he pays really well and they want power. Whatever. Most of these name tags are pointless. They don't want to crush a prize for their boss, and Blaze's desire to keep it from them is at odds with her not just running away from them. So she's an idiot for staying here, and this fight has me desperate for it to end immediately. It's not like she's in a city full of innocent people and so she'd have to defeat them to protect them. No level in Sonic Rush would have had that aspect, so this reference wasn't worth it. At least there's impact shown when the villain gets sent towards the ground by Diana. But the pink light beams looking pretty isn't gonna make me think it's a good story just because, ooh, pretty pictures. I'm bored as hell by the substanceless story. Why was there a flash of light censoring the impact when the villains got thrown into each other? They aren't even written to grunt in pain, so it's not good enough. The two girls shake hands and Blaze thanks her, and there's boring dialogue you'd expect to get from someone who never knows to stop writing dialogue and get on with it. All you had to do was have her show Diana the emerald, and we would have assumed what would happen next. Blaze immediately trusts her, even though she started out untrusting and they're strangers to each other. Sure, Blaze learned to trust Sonic, but that was about Sonic specifically, and any of his friends by extension. We could have already assumed Metal Sonic was high performance. The characters are also paper thin that I don't feel like any of the name tags are necessary for telling us stuff we don't already know just from seeing them. It's nice that he's complimented, of course, but that pales in comparison to using him great in the story. A claw launches thanks to Batman, and it miraculously grabs onto Metal Sonic's foot when he was flying at Sonic speed. This was the only reason Batman was able to start a fight with him, because Metal Sonic wasn't aware of his existence. He throws batarangs at him, but for no reason there's flashes of light censoring the impacts with them anyways. There's some pointless panels, especially pointless in a panel wasted on just showing a close-up of Metal Sonic. While Metal was distracted by Batman, the motorcycle on autopilot rammed into him, which instantly sent him crashing to the road defeated because it was going so fast and was made of metal. So that's believable if almost no time passed in between Metal Sonic landing and getting hurt. There wasn't dialogue, so any amount of time could have passed with those panels. So anyone interpreting this in good faith would assume this happened as quick as possible. If Metal Sonic had just stood still for seconds, that'd have been insulting to his character and our intelligence, because he would have killed him in all that time. It's respectful of Batman to take advantage of how smart he is by making him do a strategy to beat Metal Sonic. It'd be in bad faith to assume for no reason that the motorcycle coincidentally happened to hit him without Batman intending it to, because that wouldn't be cool if Batman victory-wise, and that was clearly the point of the scene. So the only problems with this are that it's so lucky that Batman successfully had a claw grab his foot, and that if it wasn't an iconic villain, people wouldn't have clutched their pearls at him losing so fast. It should have started with Metal Sonic not being in the process of moving so he'd have a reasonable chance of starting a fight with him, without that scenario being that Metal Sonic would see him first, because that'd mean he should have attacked him instantly. It does do Metal Sonic dirty that he had to lose so fast, which wouldn't have been required if Superman took him on because he can match his speed and take a bunch of hits. Instead, it panders to the people who don't like the Sonic series enough to think it's worth it to see Batman beat Metal Sonic, which is weird for the Sonic writer to do. The superhero fatigue is worse than ever in the world, so it's weird to pander to the people who prefer Batman over Sonic. A series that'll always matter because it was the mascot of the company that beat Nintendo in the second console generation. People who don't care about Metal Sonic and really like Batman won't mind. Most people won't care because Metal Sonic hardly talks and hasn't had a personality in years, so he's just been an overexposed badnik for a while. So he doesn't get people invested in his character anymore. And they wouldn't have liked this as much if it were a different robot. You can't give the warp effect to a Motobug, who would have made more sense intuitively to have lost so fast. But this makes logical sense, so I won't whine about it. If this happened to him right after Heroes came out, and it was a story where he was allowed to talk like he did at the end of Heroes, maybe it would have been worse to me because it would have felt like a real character. Instead of just another one of the endless robots Eggman has, who's only being used for fan service. Come to think of it, it is weird to have the non-powered character be the one to beat Metal Sonic. I just don't care because the fight scene didn't have any plot holes, and that was a miracle. If the speedster had gone after him, we all would have known how the fight was going to go immediately. Then there's another insanely boring part of the story where a ridiculous cartoon villain I don't know and care about talks forever while holding the conch from Lost World, and then he sends a deadly six after the fastest person alive. I can't read his dialogue fast enough, and his accent just makes it take a little longer. I think the next panel would be the Zeddy trying to fight him, but instead they somehow do nothing so that Flash can make fun of the fact that it's weird that a conch controls a rainbow coalition of creatures. Yes, you know what else is weird? Sonic the Hedgehog and the Flash. This kind of quippy, self-aware humor just mocks the very appeal of the franchise it's used in, so it appeals the most to its haters. Why does the villain care what the Flash thinks? There's boredom after this. There's nothing to say. At least the writer cared enough to give the Zeddy more motivation for fighting Flash than just that they're villains who fight heroes out of sadism and don't want to hear the conch. They also want to use the Emerald to wage war on the worlds below, but how do they expect to do that without the life-draining machine from Lost World working? And the roboticizer would have been disabled by Tails. He would have gone back and wrecked it if he hadn't already. Zavik's delusional. They have no reason to think they could use the power of the Emeralds for anything themselves. Why did Flash let him talk? He should have just run away instantly. He's smart to run away from him a few panels later. Zavik just calls him a coward to feel better about himself. More filler after this. It's good that Flash got the Emerald. What was the point of having the Zeddy if they weren't going to get to do anything? Why does Flynn keep bringing back the most hated villains in the franchise as if that somehow works as pandering to the fans just as well as all the other unnecessary references that aren't used by the plot? Most people hated the Zeti, and you can tell by how poorly their game sold. I thought he was supposed to be the Sonic fan that knew the franchise. Anyway, nothing but boring pointlessness until Eggman brags that now nothing's gonna stop him, just for that to get immediately undermined by him seeing Superman. So it went from looking like it was for once giving the main villain of the series who hardly gets to achieve anything permanent a chance to really get things done as a badass to humiliating him instantly. Even though Superman could have been busy doing something else, and he's not holding any emeralds. So it's not like he finished looking for the rest of them. So he just conveniently found the egg fleet before he could find any of them right away. And is instantly destroying his airships, something that's supposed to be satisfying. But isn't really, because Eggman hasn't gotten to do anything evil in this arc yet. It's the same reason it's depressing to see Squidward suffer in episodes where he hasn't done something wrong or done enough to warrant it. Superman wastes his time letting Eggman say boring things and get the protective metal cap over his head to get inside the mecha that was the penultimate boss of Sonic Heroes. There's no reason he would use that mecha again instead of something new for the sake of his ego. And even if he was in the habit of reusing a mecha, he would use the one from the previous game. Why would he use this again after it lost to 4 different teams? It's his biggest failure yet. To be fair to Superman, there's been times in the Golden Age where he let people try to hurt him out of sheer amusement at seeing their disappointment and fear when they couldn't do it. He's let people shoot him before, so this is an exaggeration of that. The problem is that he doesn't show any amusement at the situation, so that's not what's conveyed about why he's let him get to this point. Instead, he just stays deadly serious like it's Man of Steel. So it just comes off like the writer only let Eggman get this far so he could get to the reference, and not because he cares about what motivations characters have most of the time, or knows Superman that well. Again, references are just dangling keys if they don't really get taken advantage of in the story. Eggman could have had any mecha get instantly ruined by him. The story would have been the same either way. Superman has super strength and invincibility, so it really goes without saying that it makes sense that he got to Eggman so fast, absolutely effortlessly. The only reason people wouldn't like this would be that it's the most important Sonic villain that's getting humiliated. Which is a purely emotional complaint that doesn't really understand why this was written. Superman's the main character of the Justice League, so of course he was the one to face the main villain of the Sonic series. Not writing that would feel like if someone other than Sonic could beat the final boss of a Sonic game. If someone else dealt with Eggman instead, that'd be too underwhelming to be worth subverting expectations. But still, it took no creativity to write this whole scene, so it should have been paced much faster to just get it over with. Don't even have him get to threaten him with a mecha. Have the mecha be attacking a town just for Superman to smash it so that he actually got to accomplish something sweet and admirable besides just progressing the plot. Superman gets right up to Eggman lifting the metal thing so that he's defenseless, and Eggman confuses me by risking provoking him even more by whining that Superman isn't engaging in pre-battle banter, something Superman absolutely did all the time originally. I don't know how much he was mangled by recent comics, to be fair. Maybe most fans want him to be different after all that time, for all I know. But Superman's tendency for quips doesn't strike me as something they would have gotten rid of, because it's there to make him look cool and have you wish you were him. Superman tells him that his world's in danger and says he'll never understand the ambition for world domination. Which only makes sense if he thinks that Eggman doesn't want to take over the world for the sake of making it better for the people. Which Superman, if you wanted world domination, would want to do. And not someone who's been evil enough to put animals in robots. So you'd think it'd be a no-brainer for Superman figuring out why he would want to do that. I guess just doesn't want all the boring paperwork taking up time that he could spend fighting. But he doesn't explain that, so it just looks like a stupid idealist. And then Eggman tells him off for moralizing at him, but doesn't have the guts to not whisper it. And he tells him where the emerald is because he's scared of him. But why would he be scared of him if he thinks he's such an idealist? If he thinks he's so high and mighty, he wouldn't even so much as hurt him. What is he afraid of? Superman's not going to torture him for information. And Eggman doesn't deserve to be thanked for it. I feel like Superman doesn't usually thank people for telling him stuff that they're just scared into telling him. It's so lame that Eggman has a variation of the line, "I hate that hedgehog" from AOSDH, but with Kryptonium. It doesn't sound as good because it's not 2 syllables. Since when did he find out what the name of his species was? So why would he know it? And it's not even a good show. It's just more jingling keys as a reference to make easily impressed people who think like kids like the story unquestioningly. But there's way too much dialogue for a story that's got basically no story or compelling characterization to make up for it. In Luminous Forest, there's another ridiculous villain I don't know at all and never will, who's got the Wisps trapped. And she bores me by talking for too long. Green Lantern starts a fight with her. This is so slow-paced, with nothing good about any of these panels. This is so boring. That's every scene. A Wisp goes into Green Lantern and he magically finds out about all of them. Since when can Wisps do that? It just wastes my time because he talks about this without it serving the story. This isn't the same universe as the game, so it's fine to do something different. If this could happen in colors, then Tails would have never needed to work in the translator because the Wisps would have just chosen to fuse with him and Sonic to give them all the intel right away. That would have saved us a lot of time. Why isn't the villain attacking him and all the time he's talking? Because of that, he gets to one-shot her with a laser while all of the Wisps attack her. He thanks them and confusingly thinks she survived this. Well, they did absolutely nothing with the setting of Luminous Forest. There's some more boring and worthless dialogue. It didn't need to establish that his ring can run out of power if it wasn't actually going to use that for drama where he suddenly ran out in the middle of a fight. And instead it's only used and then he has to use Chaos Control to get to where its battery is to recharge it. We were under the impression that only especially powerful people that have the powers of Sonic and Shadow and Silver could use Chaos Control. Whatever. I mean, he's a superhero, so there's willing suspension disbelief. And he's clearly more powerful than Sonic. And more boring dialogue where Cyborg makes a plan instead of the story instantly moving on while showing them carry it out. Cyborg completely wastes my time in the first panel. The second text bubble just repeats exposition from the same issue. He says he could use the emeralds to create something that could allow their friends to contact them. Somehow Flash doesn't understand what he said. There's more worthless dialogue just because Batman felt like explaining it to him to be nice when that's not really who he is. He thanks him and it's boring for a while. I think this has been the most consistently boring series of Sonic stories I've read since Archie Sonic issue 152. Because at least the art's good. What does Diana say here at guide them specifically? There's more boring dialogue. Finally, they see the Sonic characters again. It ends with Superman nicely saying welcome home and Flash cathartically saying that it took them long enough. Maybe the crossover could have ended by now if it didn't waste so many panels. This issue by Ian Flynn was about the Justice League getting the emeralds by dealing with ridiculous cartoon villains I don't know without endangering any people. And somehow that was the whole story instead of Superman getting the emeralds in just seconds by never ceasing to go fast with his fists raised up. This issue was constantly boring to push through. Its pacing was so slow with practically nothing to complement most of the time, and it had way too much worthless dialogue. It again used references as a crutch to cheat its way into positive reception, which wouldn't be insulting if the story itself deserved it. And the only thing that passed for creativity was the members of the Justice League having to deal with Sonic villains they never did before, which is effortless to come up with when you're writing a crossover, so it doesn't impress me. Usually it was never done in an interesting way to watch where the villains got to show what they can do, but at least the scenes made sense because of it. The most creative part was having Batman take on Metal Sonic. Because having Flash or Superman do that would be so obvious that no creativity would be required for the scene. It subverted my expectations, which had me engaged in the scene the whole time. If it was Flash or Superman, I would have instantly known what was going to happen, and the only thing surprising would have been the order in which Metal Sonic used his powers. If it was Flash or Superman, then Metal Sonic would have gone to show off everything he could do, but that would have just been reminding me of stuff I already knew about him. So combine that with me knowing Flash wouldn't get hurt, and it'd be so boring to see. I'd rather see something I never saw before than yet another scene where a speedster he can punch takes on Metal Sonic. I say the point of how Batman beat Metal Sonic because it was meant to take advantage of the fact that he's cool and can use a variety of tools to win, in a way that's different than having him punch. It's nice to see this writer make a hero competent for once. It's not that believable that his grappling hook grabbed Metal Sonic accurately to even start the fight. But there was no other way to write this in a way that made sense for Batman to survive that would have had the scene last longer than one panel. It still should have had Batman deal with someone without extraordinary powers, and not had Metal Sonic in the story, so that nobody nitpicks that Metal Sonic lost fast, even though there's no indication that more than a split second passed after he got pulled to the ground. So it made sense that he got hit by the motorcycle. But Metal Sonic fans still complained just because they'd intuitively expect Metal Sonic to get to do better just because he's iconic. Never mind that it made sense logically. That happens so rarely with modern Sonic comics that I'm relieved when it does. A way to make the scene better would be to have another superhero start dealing the rest of the hits against Metal Sonic right after the motorcycle. Instead of having the motorcycle one-shot him when he's supposed to take 8 hits to kill, have the other 7 be dealt by a superhero. There's no way batarangs thrown by someone with normal human strength would be able to deal genuine damage to Metal Sonic. What's really underwhelming is the main villain had a panel of bragging that now he's gonna get to terrorize the world unopposed just for Superman to stop him in the same page, because it reminded me of how capable Eggman used to be, even though of course in the Superman crossover they can't show us that because Superman would effortlessly deal with him in seconds. They should have had that first panel of them then.